Let's Talk JMMA with Charlie Jewett from sogo-kaku.com. This is a podcast about the deep end of the Japanese combat sports scene. I'm your host, Shu Hirata from On the Road Management. Now, let's begin. Hey, Charlie.
Hey, Shu, how are you?
And I'm so sorry to everyone that I had to postpone the podcast twice in a row. Sorry about that.
No, it's fine. I mean, everyone's busy, and you had a little emergency going on, so it's fine.
Yeah, and plus I was on the road, and it was a little bit off the time, Anyway, so which one do you want to talk about first? I think we should talk about your favorite first team date champion.
Yes, that was cool. I will say she's not actually team date anymore, but it's just everyone remembers that.
Right. Oh, yeah, I forgot the name. Yeah, what was the name?
Team Pravjara.
Okay.
Pravjara.
Okay.
So, it was interesting because most people considered it an upset.
Okay.
But it's one of those things where going into the fight, it seemed like a lot of factors were in Karen's corner.
Uh-huh.
And those were Fujino is in her 40s now.
Yep.
Fujino's taken a lot of damage recently.
Uh-huh.
And Fujino, as you know, has always been susceptible to cuts.
Yep.
I think she's been stopped by it 3 or 4 times throughout her career. Plus, that's not even counting the fights where it wasn't stopped, but she got cut badly and continued. And Karen won her last fight due to a bad cut from an elbow.
Mm-hmm.
And it became very clear that Karen was targeting Fujino's knee that is badly damaged already. Whenever Fujino would dash in, she would try to kick her in the knee.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I was really impressed with was, this is before what I was impressed with. What Fujino was doing was Fujino was trying to take Karen down against the fence and only succeeded one time. And the problem with this is it seemed to actually tire Fujino out, who I think was surprised that it didn't tire Karen out.
Mm-hmm.
And in the 4th round, she went for kind of a sloppy takedown. Karen countered it and it immediately blasted her with 2 elbows. And then she went for a rear naked choke and actually got the arm under the chin.
Mm-hmm.
And I spoke to Vivi May afterwards, who's in Fujino's corner, and she said that it actually made it even worse because Karen squeezed Fujino's neck, which caused all this blood to shoot out of the cut on the head. And the referee, the former fighter Tomomi Tsunaba, stepped in to stop it. So, yeah, new champion. And I will be releasing an interview with her this week.
Mm-hmm.
Super charismatic. It's kind of fun. They don't live in Sendai. I think top Team Pravjara moved to Tokyo. So I think they're taking the MMA seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And her teammate and coach, Durrani, actually landed a super kick, a pro wrestling super kick in the opening seconds of his fight, broke his opponent's jaw, and then choked him out almost immediately. It was like a 28-second fight or something like that. So Team Durrani, Team Pravjara is looking good recently.
Now, let me ask you this. Team Karen, how old is she? She's like 23 years old younger than Fujino, right?
Oh, she is just turned 18. She graduated from high school 2 days before she won the championship.
Yeah, because I'm telling you, I saw the photo of Fujino and Team Karen a couple days before the fight, and it looks like a mother is taking a daughter to a graduation ceremony kind of photo, right?
Well, I mean, the fight's filled with funny statistics because I think Fujino made her debut the year Karen was born.
Oh wow!
So she's been fighting as long as Karen's been alive, and Fujino's a tank. She's super strong. Mm-hmm. I just figured she's taken so much damage in her past couple fights that a young, fresh, agile fighter might cause her problems, and that ended up being the case.
Yeah. Also, at the same time, I have to mention this: that Fujino, even though she's a veteran, her fight style hasn't changed much in the last 15 years or so.
Yeah.
So it's not that hard to read what she's going to do.
Well, I think Karen's teammate Nori actually fought Fujino in the past.
Yeah.
She gave Karen advice. She just said she's just going to keep coming forward.
Right.
She's kind of like the Korean zombie of women's MMA, or at least the way he used to fight. She's just going to keep coming forward. And Fujino actually trained with Takayo Hashi before this fight.
Mm-hmm.
And I could tell because she was fighting a very Takayo Hashi type of strategy where get to the upper body, clinch, and pin them against the cage. But I think it ended up being more exhausting for Fujino. I think it kind of backfired.
Yeah. And
Karen threw some crazy kicks. She was throwing like hook kicks. She was throwing these like Andy Hug style leg kicks. It looks like her grappling.
So do you
grappling
think
still needs a lot of work, but she throws three crazy kicks.
Karen or Nori, those girls are legit?
I think they're more legitimate than people were thinking. I think Fujino might have underestimated her massively going into the fight. I think their biggest weakness is probably grappling.
Yep. It would have to be, right.
But I was listening to the Pancrase commentary when I was there because I might be stepping in to fill in for that a little bit. And Guy, former Pancrase fighter, actually said that he described it perfectly. He said Team Prajra is essentially Taekwondo fighters.
Yeah, they are, right. Yeah. I mean, they stand like Taekwondo fighters, right.
So they say the whole Indian martial arts thing, but it's essentially just very high level Taekwondo.
I mean, they're supposedly some originated from India, right? There's fights.
That's the whole story. Like when I interviewed her, she says, "Oh, I trained with my brother and sister, Dharani and Nori." I'm like, I don't think you're actually related.
They're not related. So let me ask you this: so they're not in Sendai anymore. So they got separated from the Team Date. Yes. And my sources tell me that the Team Date were supported by this very wealthy man in Sendai.
Yes.
But now, so they're separated. So are they like another sponsor, or do they have a gym?
So what I was speaking to them, it sounds like they rent a private facility to train at in Tokyo.
Yeah. Okay.
It makes me think that they have to have some financial backing because, I mean, they're not fighting enough to be able to do that, to rent a facility in Tokyo to train in.
Well, let me ask you this: when you say private facility, do they have a ring and equipment and a cage kind of stuff, or no? Right? It's just a mat.
I don't think so. I think it's like an old. My idea. Whenever you see the videos of them training, it looks like a karate or like a judo place. There's a bunch of tatami mats.
Meaning they probably
facility in Tokyo wouldn't be cheap,
right?
Especially if you're training regularly. They seemed very popular. They have a lot of fans, and after they're from Team Date was a talent group. They did pro wrestling, kickboxing, MMA, but they also did comedy, TV. They did stuff like that.
Exactly. They do shows too, like entertainment shows, right? I mean,
so they're all very charismatic, and they know how to talk to people. They know how to talk to fans and everything.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah.
So after the event, I mean, she was out in the hallway, and she was by the big original King of Pancrase trophy, and she was taking pictures with everybody. So I think they know how to interact with the fans. And
I mean, that's just like same as idol singers there. I mean, like underground idols, they do like handshake events and stuff like that, right?
I did notice there was an older guy there with them who was like bringing over VIPs to meet them.
Okay.
So I think they have some sort of management situation going on. I think they're still part of Team Date. That whole group.
Part of Team Date, huh?
No, I think that they're a separate team, but I think that that's still the same management group, if I had to guess. And I think they still probably have the same sponsors.
You know, I'm telling you, this is going to be very interesting if she keeps on winning. I mean, she's tiny, right? And she's like 150 centimeter.
Yeah.
Which is tiny. And I think she's not going to grow much taller, right? I mean, considering she's 17. Huh. It could be. Yeah.
She's made it very clear she wants to fight for RIZIN. And she also wants to fight for the UFC. Now, RIZIN seems the more realistic option. And with RIZIN also talking about an atomweight tournament this year, having the RIZIN historically has loved the whole high school fighter angle.
Oh yeah, of course, right. And I mean, she can also do super atom too, right? She can pretty much do anything, right? In that team, will allow her to fight at any weight class.
Yeah, I spoke to her. She walks around in like 55 kilo. So I think 49 wouldn't be too far of a stretch for her to get to.
not at all. Right. Yeah. So this is going to be interesting addition to the Japanese MMA. I always thought that some of the girls on that team has potential. I mean, the girl who fought. I mean, Nori fought what? Amy on the first debut fight
Right.
and Mizuki on the second fight, and took a decision kind of stuff. That just doesn't. It's not that easy, right?
Well, that's one of those things where Team Date now and Team Pravjara, they had so many fighters that bunch of them just got like smashed, and
Mm.
you're like, oh, this doesn't seem legitimate. But
Exactly.
then
I
all
mean,
of a sudden,
you'd say
3
that
fighters
most of them
emerged.
doesn't look like they know MMA, right? At the
Right.
first, right?
But now you
It's
have
a
some
smart,
fighters that seem
right?
to be taking it very seriously.
Yeah, I'm telling this. I not to. Yeah, I guess I was making a little bit fun of them. Remember, like a few years ago, Team Date posted the video on YouTube. Oh, they're like hitting pads, but it was almost
Mhm.
like a dancing, like spinning around and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah. Mhm.
And every time I bumped into some very good at boxing coach on any shows or any gym, I kind of show that video, and most of them just can't believe that those girls actually fight. You know,
Right, well, yeah, and, I think there was, like, Hana Date, and there were some other ones. I
right?
think most of them eventually went more back to, like, kickboxing or pro wrestling, but Karen I think what happened was Nori and Karen and Darani actually did well at MMA, and they
Mhm.
seemed very interested in it, and I think they worked something out where they formed their own team that only focuses on MMA.
I mean, like you said, of course, Sakakibara and the rising the
Mhm.
chunk of Verizon fans will love a fighter like that, right? I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Well,
So
I've been
actually, they should
saying
have ended up in RIZIN.
for a long time, I think Rising's atomweight division is on the tipping edge of just, like, being completely reset
Mm-hmm.
because the current roster, besides Kana Asakura, is all over 40 years old,
Right.
and there's this young talent coming up that's just in the perfect position to take over.
Then don't you think it's maybe better to start building 115 and 125 instead?
Oh, and Ryzen?
Yeah, for
I don't
girls,
know.
women.
I mean, if I would like them to have another division,
Hmm.
maybe like flyweight, but there's only, let me
Yeah,
think,
there's
there's
only
only
a
1 or
handful
2
that are
women only
strawweight.
1 or 2 women at strawweight in Japan
Right.
right now.
Maybe
That
Miki
goes
Motono.
down,
That's about it, right? And maybe Izawa.
but both of them dropped down.
Right, I know. But they
Mhm.
shouldn't drop down though. I
That's
really don't
true.
think so. But anyway, so speaking of this flyweight women, let's talk about our favorite subject, Miss Rin
Mhm.
Nakai in
Yeah.
Vince's flyweight tournament. And I'm sorry I didn't even have a time to watch that yet, but how was that?
Oh, the event overall was awesome. It was a great event.
How was the
Um,
fights? How were the
they're
fights?
great. They're great. I enjoyed all of them immensely. It was a really good event. I actually spoke with Anouk, who's a Dutch fighter and
Hmm.
one of the guys from We Are Rising about it yesterday. We did a little recap. But
Hmm.
Rin Nakai is kind of a very terrifying person because she she stood and struck with Fujita for the first round and part of the
Hmm.
second, and then she took her down as soon as she wanted to. Like, it was just immediate and won with ground and pound. And afterwards, she said, "Oh, I just wanted to work on my striking and get some experience in the cage." And then when she said if I wanted to take her down, I could have taken her down whenever I wanted. I was like, "Oh, it's pretty intimidating stuff."
Well, I mean, she even said that she purposely fought the full 10 minutes just to get the experience going, which is fine. But on the other side of the coin, that means is like she was far better than the opponent, right? On this fight,
Mhm,
or can
mhm.
she do the same against a girl like Shizuku Sugiyama or the you know?
Well, I actually remembered yesterday someone that, when I was talking to Andrew,
Hmm.
Nakai Reen has historically been a very slow starter,
Yeah.
and it did cause her some trouble when she was in her Pancrase career.
Hmm.
And she still won those fights, but it made them closer than they should have been. And so it'll be interesting to see if she still has that slow start problem when she goes on May 8th for the next round of the tournament.
Now,
But
are they
mhm,
gonna do another drawing or?
yes, it's gonna be another random drawing to decide the semifinal and the final, and then the finals will be the same night.
Hmm. Well, this is gonna be interesting. I mean, how Sugiyama is gonna do against her?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a weird because the two other fighters in it almost don't matter because they have such little chance of winning.
Yeah,
This has just become Rin Nakai versus Sugiyama.
right.
But this fight's huge. Both of them need that win. Rin
Mhm,
Nakai is obsessed with going to the UFC. It's all she's thinking about.
mhm.
And I think she thinks that winning this tournament will help her get that chance to go to the UFC.
Well, I mean, that next one is May 8th, right?
Yes.
Well, I mean, if the Singapore show happens in June, it's a possibility. I mean, right, you know,
And I spoke to Usami, who was even saying, like, if she can't do flyweight, she could even do strawweight. I think they're just whatever gets her in.
she should do strawweight. I always thought that that's her best weight class. Yeah. So Usami knows about the possibility of Singapore show and everything else.
He knows about Singapore and he knows about the Asian Contender Series. So I think
Okay.
they're trying to make her active.
Yeah, I mean, it
And
only makes sense. So she could get 3 wins on this tournament, right? And so that will get back her into the activities, right? So I mean, who knows?
hopefully, I mean, it's kind of perfect because if she can get 3 finishes, that's 3 finishes in 1 year. She
Yeah,
wins the championship and a tournament.
that's perfect.
Yeah.
Right. The only thing is that I think she's just too old for contenders. So, but it could happen with the Singapore show or even later, right? So,
Right.
yeah. So
Plus, I
that's
mean, I know she's difficult to deal with, but it would just make good business sense, I feel like, to have her if you were interested in doing a Japan show in the near future.
well. I think she's easy to deal with. I think the Usami is the one difficult
Yes.
to deal with. So,
Yeah, true.
but it seems like he knows everything about what's going on. So he knows. I think it seems like he's back on the right track.
Right.
That's good. I'm happy for her. I mean,
Yeah,
she doesn't have that much years left, so she should get going right with what she needs to do.
like I said.
Yeah.
My wife was watching. Deep Jewels released their back. They do these backstage videos now
Mhm.
that are a lot of fun to watch. And they
Okay.
showed the Rin Nakai backstage, and my wife was like, "Oh, she's gotten old." So yeah, so that's definitely at times ticking away.
Hey, that's all right. She should just. I mean, she's doing the right thing now. Finally, so I'm happy for her, and
Me
we'll see.
too.
So
And then
then let's talk
I will
about the
say
next
also
one. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
also on that card real quick, I will say Miki Matano looked really good,
really.
and I expect to see her in Rising. I mean, if they're doing an atomweight tournament, she's got to be in it.
Yeah, I
And
knew it was going to be
Moetti
fun.
Suda, who I didn't realize till yesterday, her dad is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and
Who?
that might explain Moetti Suda.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
The 17-year-old from Osaka who's now fighting Saudi Oshima for
Hiroshima,
the
right?
atomweight
Yeah.
championship.
I think that's going to be an interesting fight.
It's gonna be a great fight because
Yeah.
the backstage footage. I said this yesterday without having seen the video. Saudi Oshima lost, but I think she had a lot of stuff going into the fight. She had corona right beforehand, so she had some issues.
Hmm.
She seems super fired up, and I expect to see a fire lit under her and her to come out like a banshee in the next fight. So it should be a great fight between two really good grapplers.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that. I mean, it seems like a Deep Jewel's doing very well under Rising. It's almost like some cards are better. Some of the.
Oh, yeah. It was kind of weird because I was kind of actually more excited for this Deep Jewels card than some of the earlier Rising cards this year.
I know. Now, let's talk about Shooto then, since we're talking about this so-called feeder show first. That
Mhm.
Shooto show happened, right, on Korakuen Hall. And both, let's talk about Ando first, who beat Ryo Okada, which is the former Shooto champion and also a rising veteran. And I don't know if a lot of people, most fans remember about this guy, Tatsuya Ando, but he was in the Road to UFC Japan show about, 6, 7 years ago.
Mhm.
He was a protege at the bantamweight, but he was forced to fight in 145 because that was the tournament. So but I thought he was the most talented guy in that tournament, which didn't make it to the final. Now, were you able to see this fight?
I have not seen this fight.
Okay. Now, what do you think about Shooto these days? I mean,
I think it's getting back on track.
mhm,
I think they had this weird moment where they were essentially a feeder organization for one championship,
right.
and it never sat well with me that they had a one championship logo bigger than their own logo inside of the ring. But
Right.
That relationship doesn't exist anymore. They're
No,
kind of
it is
doing a fun thing with their women's divisions. They have that whole Infinity League going on,
right.
and they have some young talent emerging for the new championships.
Right. So that's good. That young talent you're talking about has to be this guy, Nishikawa, right? Yamato Nishikawa?
Yes.
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 Now, after the fight, he said that he wants title shot. If not, then I want to go to RIZIN.
Right. Mhm.
Yeah. Now, remember him was saying like I want to go to one championship
Yes.
before that, but now suddenly it stopped because there's no relationship with Shooto and one.
Mhm.
Yeah, but I'm hearing this. Actually, one was actually ready to sign this kid, but there's one thing it's prevented him from signing, is that his father has a philosophy of not trusting COVID vaccine. So he's not
Oh,
vaccinated. He's not
okay.
willing to take the vaccine shot. So I think he's saying no to most of the offers from outside Japan. That's why I
Mhm.
think he shifted his course towards the RIZIN now.
Well, I mean, that would make sense if you aren't able to leave. Rising is the best possible option for you in the meantime.
Sure. Right.
And
And he's, you know,
he's 19. I mean, these Pancrase, Deep, and Shooto cards, by necessity, they're
hmm
going to have some older guys on them. They're going to have
right.
some veteran fights. They're going to have some journeyman fights. But there are fighters like this. I mean, he's 19 years old.
And kind of
And
this kid,
yeah,
it was very, very interesting. So I wish he's vaccinated because he would be perfect to go to Asia contenders.
right, exactly.
Yeah, so it's
I
too
mean, his
bad the
record's
father
kind of
doesn't believe
crazy.
in vaccine. You know?
I mean, his record's kind of crazy for how young he is.
Yes, and I'm
He's getting
hearing
close to
that
30 fights.
right, and I heard that his feet is so big, and there's so much interesting story I hear about him that his father is so into training him in a mountain kind of stuff. So they take him to the mountain and train in there kind of thing.
Is it when you mentioned one championship, is it I've you're hearing more and more on the Japanese scene, like, just bad opinions about the organization? There's, like, a
It,
kind of a people have kind of weary. They're like, "Oh, they can be sketchy, things can be weird." Do you think people
well,
are hesitant to go there now?
yeah, you know what? I think I can see the both side because during the pandemics, of course, they couldn't put up a show, so they had to put a lot of fighters on the deck.
Right.
And that actually, before that, they had this period that one actually did put a lot of fighters on the deck and didn't make fighters active. That changed, right? And but now it came back again. So what happened about 7, 8 years ago? People kind of start remembering. Maybe it's the same thing.
Right.
And but when you really look into the real details, like for example, guy like Kami Kubo has complained publicly that I'm not getting fights and blah blah blah. But the reality is they did give him a fight offer. He's the one who said no. So when you
Yeah.
say no to the fight offers, of course you have to push back. You'll be pushed back and maybe have to wait for a couple of months. So a lot of things like I think a lot of fighters didn't realize that, so they complain. And
Mhm.
also, there are fighters like Koyomi Matsushima who went through the whole 6 fights and decided to not re-sign with him and set up the matching period and everything else, and now became a free agent. So there are some handful of fighters out there who it's not like they weren't happy with one. They were happy with one, but once they're over with the 6 fight or fight contract, whatever that they sign, I think they want to test different waters. Or
Yeah.
I like Kamikubo who won all 6 fights, now probably believing that maybe he might get a shot at UFC.
Yes.
So like it's funny about the Japanese fighters. Some fighter believes that the fighter permanently kind of belongs to the one promotion. So when you
Mhm.
leave one promotion, it's a huge deal that they might or maybe they were not happy with the promotions, or like maybe they got into argument or the president cut them off, whatever that is. But sometimes this is just the contract's over, so they decide to take a different step.
Yeah.
And that's what's happening because I'm saying this because the other fighters stayed. Like Shoko Sato stayed, guy like Aoki Akiyama, as they had a good fights right this past weekend, and BB
Oh,
May,
listen,
you know.
that event this weekend was awesome. That was a great event.
Oh, I
A
thought
full
so
day
too.
event. It was filled with awesome fights.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, we can touch on that real quickly because I thought that event was awesome too. I mean,
Yeah.
not just that Akiyama Aoki had a good story, but DJ showed his standing ability. I was so impressed. I think, I thought he might beat Rotan in Muay Thai
Yeah.
fights, right? I mean, who knows?
A fight that was just fill a card. I mean, I know it was technically 3 cards,
Mhm.
But they put together so many interesting fights that I was
Oh, yeah.
interested in.
I I mean, for now.
The Ham Sohee fight was awesome. The Ham Sohee really came back
Oh, yeah.
and beat the hell out of that girl that she had the controversial fight with the first time.
You're right, and I said now on the record for now in year 2022, maybe that was the best show in MMA
Mhm.
for now,
Yes.
right? There's no doubt about that. So I even wrote that to Matt Hume on the email because I had to discuss with him about Okami's next fight. He was there as
Yeah.
a guest, and stuff like that. So anyway, so to go back to the Shooto, it's too bad that Nishikawa is not going to one championship or not going to anything outside Japan, you know. So
Well, he's very welcome in RIZIN, though. It'd be a very welcome addition if he joined.
now, do you wanna bet, see if he's gonna end up in the Rising or he'll end up in doing the title fight in Shooto?
You'd think that Shooto would want to hold on to him.
I think
So,
so too. I think so. They're gonna create the title fight for him.
mhm.
Yeah. So anyway, so this is gonna be pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this. So let's go and
Perfect for
talk
one of their VTJ shows if they were still doing that.
that too. I don't know if they were gonna do it. They
Mhm.
might, but right now they're not with Abema. They're not so close to Abema TV too. So we'll
Okay.
see. Yeah. Now let's talk about Rising 34. All right, I gotta ask you this. What is your thought about Dominator versus Mr. Hagiwara, the main event?
Um, yeah, so I was watching the fight, and I've always felt like Dominator was kind of on the way out.
Mm-hmm.
So this was kind of a fight that Rising set up for Hagiwara to do well in. And he hurt Hagiwara. I mean, he hurt Dominator early on,
Mm-hmm.
but then when he got on top of him, his grappling makes no sense. I
Yeah.
mean, I saw how he had his arm across Dominator's chest and was just leaving
Mm-hmm.
it there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was watching, and I just looked at my wife and said, "He needs to move his arm. Like he needs to move his arm. He needs to move his arm. This is not this is where Dominator wants his arm to be." And he didn't fight it at all. And his grappling skills just look awful. I mean, I've made jokes about it in the past, but
Mm-hmm.
it's never looked as bad as it did that day.
Yeah, he even admitted that he doesn't know what he was doing. He didn't know how to defend triangle and blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So
And
it's
but it's a fight IQ thing. Like even if you don't know how to do that stuff,
Mhm.
you should know that you shouldn't be in that position.
Of
Like
course
you
because
should
you already
stand
set
up.
up in that position, right? You can't get out
If
of
you rock him on the feet, get back to the feet. Don't go down and grapple with the guy. Yeah.
Well, I mean, so I think officially we could say out of any so-called major league Japanese MMA show, that was the weakest main event ever in history. It would have to be.
It was pretty bad.
That was
Because
pretty bad.
Dominator is coming off of a really rough win over Noah,
Right? Who
who
was
was
it?
a
Was his
kickboxer.
first pro MMA fight, right? Benoa's.
Right. So it's like if Noah is able to successfully challenge Dominator's grappling and he's just come over from kickboxing, what the hell is Hagiwara doing? Like, what's he doing down in Osaka?
Yeah, I
I'm
mean,
starting to, to be even more, not to be too critical, but it's just wondering, like, I mean, would Hagiwara even be in this position if the pandemic didn't happen?
yeah, exactly right. I mean,
Mhm.
it's amazing that he's actually in main event and making
Mhm.
good money, driving a very nice car, kind of stuff.
Right.
If this was pre-pandemic, he would be belong to the middle of the pack on Deep or Pancrase or
Right.
Shooto, right?
He'd probably be over in Road FC. They'd be in the resident Japanese fighter for them.
Right. So really, but still, the reality is that many of the rising diehard fans are still very excited about featherweight division.
Mhm.
Yeah, and they
Right.
count
So
him as one of the key factors in that division, which I don't think so.
if they put a tournament on this year, like they're talking about, I just don't think you can put Hagiwara in it, knowing that Koike and other people are in there that would just smash him.
Right. I mean, Koike Saito. I
Yeah.
mean, even got my guy like Majima.
Or even Mikuru
Mikuru, of
out
course.
grappled him. So, yeah.
Right. I mean, it's just no chance. And
Right.
and Poirier is there. You know.
I mean, I'm saying it's almost as if what you want to do with him now, I don't think they would do this, but what I would do with him is just leave him on landmark cards
Mm-hmm.
and just make fun fights for him until he gets better.
I think that's what they're going to do, because it seems like a Landmark does have a very good profit margin, obviously. So, and I'm hearing that, after the April show, they might even squeeze in one more Landmark show in the first week of May. So they're really, really active on putting up shows now.
Right.
So it makes sense to have that division, right, opposed to numbers series, so-called, where the real top guys are fighting.
Well, if I was them, I would start putting Ren and him on the same Landmark card,
Mm-hmm.
and start building up the tension between that and build a potential rematch in the future between them.
Oh yeah, I mean, Ren is perfect for Landmark brand, but
right.
I think Ren wants to fight in front of a crowd next. He has all these specific requests, so I have to try to accommodate that somehow.
Yeah,
But
you guys see how Fuji feels about the face tattoo now.
yeah. Now, other than the Hagiwara Dominator main event, was there any fight that you thought it was worth mentioning, or fighter that worth mentioning or discussing here?
Yamaniha was really impressive.
Okay, yeah, Yamaniha was impressive. Yeah,
this is the first time I've ever seen him actually use grappling. I think it's the only time.
Striking, right? Yeah,
it's only the second time he has won via submission, and now he's scheduled to fight Montoya. So he's got a little interest. He's got some.
Exactly. Oh, I was just going to say that they put him right back in there against Montoya, which is actually a very great matchmake, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well,
so
that's the fight. When we were recapping the event, it's kind of the fight I suggested. I was like, Montoya versus him seems perfect,
right?
Because just like their styles match up so well. I think it should be a fun fight. They can both grapple. They can both strike. So it should be a lot of fun. But outside of that, I mean, the Taiga fight was kind of nuts. But Rising 34 was kind of not the most interesting card to me.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah, same here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But compared to that, Rising 35 and Trigger Third is doing okay, right? I mean, the third announcing card.
The Trigger card is better than Rising 34.
I thought so too.
It's like my friend Jamie, who lives in Kyoto, went to the Osaka card. When he saw the announcements for the Trigger show, he was like, "This is better than the card I just went to." So,
right.
Yeah.
So
Rising's looking much better.
Rising is looking good, and they're going to still, obviously booking all the non-Japanese fighter outside of Japan too, right? So that's actually a very promising. And I'm hearing the rumors that they're talking to quite interesting fighters, in terms of American fighters, Brazilian fighters, and stuff like that. So I think why not? We see like a lot of the interesting guys. Now, out of Rising Trigger, I'm assuming Yachi Gustavo is going to be the main event. Now, if you were the promoter to pick co-main, which fight are you going to pick?
I keep going. That would be funny, but that never happened.
Right,
the Kuromoto fight should clearly be the co-main event. Are the ones announced?
Yeah, I think so. Or Kanehara Majima, right? But the Kintaro's popularity will probably put them in the co-main event.
Plus, I mean, this is going to be a hell of a fight too, because if Kuromoto decides to strike with Kintaro, people in Osaka will go nuts at the brawl that happens.
Right.
But Kuromoto might take him to Suplex City and his last fight, I don't think I've ever seen that in an MMA fight before, where a guy was laying on his back and then the guy picked him up and then slammed him down again. So, yeah, I think Kuromoto's on a hot streak, and I think it's brilliant to put him back in there so quickly because he's a little older. He's like in his mid to late 30s. Is he 35?
Yeah, he's up there, right? So
gotta get him.
Try to get him in like 4 fights this year.
Gotta get him the chances while he can. And his last fight, normally I don't like quick tick turnarounds, but his last fight was such a one-sided beating.
It is, right?
And this is a good matchup for him, so I think it's perfect for him.
Right, and also you have to remember the Kuramoto only got to fight once last year. So not much.
Oh, but I think he's on the verge of, if he keeps performing the way he is, I think they've struck gold with him. Right. I saw him. He came to the Deep Jewels card. He was there, I think, to support Sugiyama. They train at the same gym.
Yeah, Miwi, right?
It was kind of funny. He was like a celebrity arrived. He was there with his wife, and it was kind of funny to see who was more famous.
Was wife more famous?
With some people, I mean, was she an Olympic wrestler, right?
Right. I mean, she won the gold medal. She was a national hero.
Yeah.
So yeah, for a couple of weeks or so during that time, she was always on TV. So
yeah, I still have hopes that she'll make her MMA debut one day, but we'll see.
well, and she just had the baby. But who knows with those super athletes, right? I mean, they could
There now.
be training now, so who knows? But I know for the record, I can tell you that for the record, I know for sure that RIZIN is very interested in her. Why not, right? I mean, she's a gold medal winner.
Well, I mean, they're clearly interested in the women. I mean, Sakaki Bar was at Deep Jewels, and Sidario's brother was at Deep Jewels. There's like a who's who of the RIZIN people at the event. So,
right now, the good thing you mentioned Sidario's brother, just to let people know that who is this guy, Taka Kenshin.
So I love this. This is the most JMMA thing to happen in such a long time. Like, there are two heavyweights. Both were in sumo and both got kicked out of sumo.
Yep.
They're twins.
Yep.
And now they're both training at different MMA gyms. This is like a weird experiment, and I'm all about seeing who does better.
Now, Anson trains the brother. Where does he train?
I think he said he trains at Alliance.
Oh, really? Alliance at the TK Kosaka's?
Yeah, with Hioki and them.
You know, that means he's a I wouldn't say training partner. He's a teammate, or maybe he goes to the same school as my nephew. My nephew's doing the wrestling school at TK's. So, yeah, and actually, I got an email from my sister saying, I can't believe TK's fighting. How old is he? He's going to get killed. But I said, I'm telling TK is pretty tough.
Yeah, he's a tough guy.
Yeah.
But I mean, for Takanet, what's his name?
Taka
Kenshin.
Yeah.
Okay, Taka Kenshin. For Taka Kenshin, people have to remember though, it's gonna be so hard for him because he looks like his brother because they're twins.
It's hard to
just started, so he's gonna have a hard learning curve to catch up to his brother.
Now, just so you know, so both got kicked out. What did he get kicked out of sumo? Did
he
get
was for
weed or something?
Yeah, he was weed.
Okay. Well, I mean, just so you know, for the fans who doesn't know, Mr. Shrek Sekine used to be a policeman. So he used to be on the side where bust people who smokes weed and stuff like that. So,
and let's not forget, Shrek is coming off of a giant win over Shibasai.
Oh, I know. That was a big upset, I think.
Shrek may be an old man, but he proved in that fight that you have to finish him. You can't just hurt him.
Right.
And he will keep coming at you no matter how exhausted he gets.
Right.
And
he's a pro wrestler, so he's got that character. He knows how to show off his, personality and everything else.
Well, didn't he actually did like a wrestling suplex against Shibasai?
No, he's into doing things. Yeah, it's like a typical pro wrestler mentality, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, besides those two, I should mention about him, Takaki Soya. He was a great fighter when he came into the scene. I remember talking to Sean Shelby about him when he was like beating up everybody, but all of a sudden he had to sideline himself because he got sick, right? And for the past 12 months, he made a RIZIN debut, and then he had to stay away because he got sick again for like 12 months or so. Now finally he's making a comeback. I think it's a great story. I think it's great that he's making a comeback. It's too bad that nobody is really writing about it, right?
So what, he's like 2 years out of the ring, right?
Yeah, almost. But he was a great fighter. I mean, he was beating everybody. He was a great striker as a flyweight. It was back then when UFC was just starting flyweight division, and he was one of the fighters that Sean Shelby was mentioning.
Now, was it like a chronic illness, or do you know what was going on?
It was kind of weird illness. It's something very strange. I forgot.
Okay,
yeah, I can look into that, but I guess something that he has to work and live with the rest of his life. It seems like,
Well, it'll be really interesting to see what his return is like, because sometimes those debilitating issues can be a big deal. But if he overcomes it, that'd be a great story.
Right? Yeah. So it's gonna. I think it's great. So all right. So next one. Besides that, let's go back to RIZIN 34. Another fight I forgot to mention is that Daisuke Nakamura lost. Remember?
That's such a bullshit decision.
What happened to that? I didn't watch that fight.
Well, I have to admit I'm incredibly biased, and I want Daisuke Nakamura to win, so that
Uh-huh.
probably clouds my judgment.
Uh-huh.
But it was a weird fight where his opponent, the much younger man,
Yeah.
kept seemed like he was yelling at Nakamura for not striking with him, despite the fact that Nakamura was the one throwing all the strikes and
Really?
chasing the guy down. And then it had some, but when it did go to the ground, the grappling exchanges were awesome. There were some great grappling exchanges,
Hmm.
but there were some moments where it turned into kind of a weird kickboxing match.
Okay, because he fought that guy, the Sora Yamamoto, right? Kenichi
Mhm.
Yamamoto's son.
Right.
Yeah. And he's supposedly a featherweight, so he actually gave up a few weight classes to fight Daisuke Nakamura.
Right. It was a weird. I mean, the pro wrestling stuff kind of makes sense because he was yelling at him, but I, I just felt like Nakamura won.
Really?
He
Was it
threatened
split
with way
decision?
more submission attempts throughout the fight. I mean, when he grabs your arm, it's terrifying. It's like Imanari on your leg. It kind of reminds me of Sakuraba back in the day, where Nakamura's just like, I don't care how I get a hold of your arm. Once I get it,
Mhm.
I'm going for an armbar.
Right. So this is a fight. Maybe it deserves the another rematch.
Of course. I mean, Nakamura's knocked out the current champion, Ushiku. He should be in the tournament.
Uh, that's true. It's
Can you
true.
imagine what a Nakamura Koike fight would be like? I mean, there might be some weird grappling exchanges in that fight.
But do you think this win will put Sora Yamamoto into the contentions in the featherweight division?
Not yet. It was too close of a fight. I don't think it was. And it
Well, let
wasn't
me
the
ask
right
you
sport
this: do you
for it.
think Sora Yamamoto will beat Kyohei Hagiwara?
Yes.
So that may be the fight that they might do then.
Yes.
It kind of makes
He,
sense.
I mean, he showed clear grappling skills,
Uh huh.
and if you have clear grappling skills and can handle yourself on your feet, I think you can beat Hagiwara at this point.
That's too bad.
Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this: are you hearing anything more about upcoming Tenshin Takeru fight?
Nothing. They've gone kind of radio silent.
That's what I
The only
thought.
thing I heard about it was the only thing I heard was when Kenji said he wanted to be on the card,
Hmm.
and Sakakibara kind of laughed that off, saying that would never happen. I don't think K1 would want Kenji. I mean, I don't think K1 would want Koji on a card. I don't think they like Koji.
That's true because he left, right? So I mean, but it's going to be all kickboxing fights, I hear.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Isn't Gomi supposed to be on it?
maybe that makes sense because they probably have the good budget to pay him,
Yeah. Well, I heard
right?
that I think that might have been part of the deal with him taking the fight last minute
That could be.
on New Year's Eve, was that he wanted on the kickboxing show.
Well, that makes sense, But who else do you think you'll see in that fight in the show?
I mean, it's kind of weird, right? Do they go all out or do they go boxing style and know that they don't have to?
I'm hearing they go all out, and what they want to do is like a Rise versus K1 or Rise slash
Ooh.
Rising versus K1 kind of thing.
Well, if they're going to do that, I would love to see Yaman on it again. Yaman was awesome in Rising. His fight
Hmm.
with Koji was super exciting.
Makes sense.
And I mean, if it's going to be a Rise card, then what? It's got to be like Prince Taiju. He's very popular. Hagewara is that guy's name? Who's the other
Yeah,
fighter?
there's a Shiro who's probably can be
Yes.
ready for that too. So
Yeah. I mean, Rise has a bunch of really good kickboxers, and so does K1. So I mean, if they're going to do Rise versus K1, they can put together a very solid card.
I think this is my prediction. You know who is going to be fighting in that show for sure?
Pancha Marina. No.
Yeah, I just read my mind. It has to be right, right?
Yes. It would make sense because I feel like you want to put one women's fight on it just to have the diversity and to get the different eyes on it. And Panchan Marina, because there's talks about Kai. Kai was interested in being on the event as well.
Mm-hmm.
And if Kai is on it, then she's absolutely going to be on it because they seem to follow each other around.
That's true. Yep. So that's I asked that question because I'm still a little bit I'm gonna say this on the record that they announced Takeru Tenshin fight. They haven't decided on the weight class. They haven't really finalized on the rules. I don't know how can you announce fights like that. What if they
Yeah.
don't agree what are they going to do, really? You know?
Well, Code Mayday just said that Tension is fighting this weekend. Is there a
Mhm.
chance that they're waiting for them both because they both have fights scheduled? Is
Right.
there a chance they're waiting to make sure they both win before they move
Exactly.
forward?
Or both don't get injured. I mean, they could
Right.
get injured theoretically, right? What if you broke your fist? That's it. You can't have a fight in June. There's
Yeah.
no way, right? So we'll
That's
see.
why it's crazy to me that they scheduled other fights for them.
You know what? That's why, I can't blame some people being a little bit suspicious about some Japanese combat sports because it really doesn't make sense, right? I
Yeah.
mean, especially in
I mean,
striking,
talking about
getting injured is pretty big,
millions of dollars on the line
on the
for
line,
bullshit
exactly.
fights that don't mean anything.
Right. And I mean, what are they going to do with the sponsors or televisions and all kinds of stuff, right? If one gets injured, and that's a
Because
too
I'd
much,
hate to have like a Mayweather Pacquiao situation where one of them goes in there injured.
right? And I mean, exactly. So that's too much burden on one fighter's shoulder, I think. But
Yeah.
that's just always been like that. They think that's the responsibility that they have to take.
Mhm.
But anyway, so let's talk about. I need to talk about this one. Did you get to see Mr. Takashi Sato fight in UFC London?
I did not. No.
All right.
Is the
Well,
only way to watch the UFC in Japan to join Fight Pass?
right, and those are very good deals, though, right? It's like
Yeah, it is. It is.
right, and you don't have a fight bet still.
No. Well, I mean, between the UFC and now One Championship selling pay-per-views, my fight dollar is being stretched thin.
I was just gonna say that. I mean, so that's just the reality, right? So most of the fans are same, so they don't choose Fight Pass, even though it's a great deal.
Right, just because now that RIZIN is doing a bunch of pay-per-view shows,
Hmm.
it starts to add up on the how much money you spend on your MMA consumption.
Right, because I mean, for those who doesn't know, that the Fight Pass in Japan is like great deal, right? Isn't
Like
like
Netflix. Like
right, like you get to watch all the pay-per-view shows and everything,
Mhm,
right? And
mhm.
it's like what, like $40 a year, or whatever that is. It's pretty cheap, isn't it?
I think it's like 10 or 15 bucks a month or something. I don't know the exact
Or a
price.
month, right. So, yeah, but
Mhm.
that's bargain.
Yeah. No, compared to what people in the United States pay, it's insane rate.
Yeah,
But yeah, I just don't have yep, just don't have the time or the just to rationalize watching every UFC show now as well as all the Japanese shows.
right. Well, just so you know, of course, UFC in London was packed house because in
Mhm.
London nobody wears masks. It seems like they all forgot about COVID, which is fine. And in terms of fights, I mean, Sato, this was the first fight in over a year, so he was a little rusty. But the Nelson was the first fight over in 2.5 years, so
Right.
they both had
Yeah,
the
I
big.
thought it
Yeah,
sounded like a while since Gunnar Nelson had last fight.
yeah, and Sato was taking the control in terms of he was on the center pressing, but really couldn't throw that signature left straight
Mhm,
entire fight and got taken down every round and got control. You
mhm.
know, and I've been laying low during the pandemic and didn't go too many shows, but I went back to UFC shows for the first time in a couple of years. Watched a lot of guys train and kind of stuff, and I just feel like Japanese MMA is now more far behind than the world top MMA.
You think the gap's gotten even bigger?
Even way bigger. I think it just got bigger, and every time I hear guys who has a last name ending with a V, or even the coaches with the last name ending V, I start watching their practices and I start talking to them.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
not only that, like even last week's Columbus show, they got the Mongolian guys who looked pretty good, even though he lost. Even the
Mhm.
UFC London show, we got that Spanish guy who looked really good. I mean, there are a lot of guys who's coming from a small team, never even heard of it. It looks much better than most of the guys in Rising.
Well, I mean, it all started when no one had heard of the team in New Zealand, and then all of a sudden, a bunch of champions come out of there. So
Exactly right.
small
So,
teams can work, and you no longer have to be in the United States. I mean, there's teams from all around the world that are producing top talent.
oh, exactly, like AK Thailand to Tiger Muay Thai. Also, like you said, you mentioned New Zealand to
Mhm.
many teams around the globe. And
Yeah.
just because Japan, because Horiguchi, everybody only talks about ATT, but there are a lot of good teams all over the place. You know,
I interviewed Rin Nakai. Guess what gym she wants to train at?
ATT.
Yes.
I put money on it. That's all she knows. I bet.
Yeah. Mhm.
But
So
here's what it is. I hate to say this, but in terms of female MMA, I don't know why nobody's really talking about our client's team, Prava, Vale Tudo. It's Jessica Andrade, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, they've been doing really well.
there.
I remember when the one girl on that team fought in RIZIN, Maria.
Maria Oliveira, right? Who is in
I was
UFC now?
super impressed with her in RIZIN, and I was kind of surprised it took so long for her to get into the UFC.
Right. I mean, that's because she had to fight Marina Rodriguez in contenders and lost and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which was not
But
a shame, you know.
yeah, but she's still very impressive
Right.
considering the
I remember that
circumstances.
team has Andrade and Invicta champion Deruboni. They got Carol Rosa, who just lost to Sarah McMahon, who was 4-0 and 5-1, 4-1 in the UFC now. Maria Oliveira, and that's a pretty damn good bunch of girls, right?
Yeah.
From the
Are
one,
they all in Vegas now?
they're all in Vegas training with the Kanako Murata and stuff like that. So that's a pretty solid girls team.
Right. And nobody talks about it. You're right.
Nobody talks about it. Nobody. And it's so funny that coach of that team used to be known as the last guy to call to put in like real a fish on the show. So he was like putting fishes on the show all over the places. That's how he got all this network. And one day, one of the fighters he put, the opponent was Jessica Andrade, and realized, oh, this girl is talented, and started training her, and that was the beginning of everything. And I'm telling you right now, it's so funny. Do you know where he started his own gym? Is his mother's living room. His fighters used to train in mom's living room. Dude, he got his gym.
It's kind of funny because you always tell who he trains because they all kind of, it looks like a little Jessica Andrade fighting. It's like he has a very unique style he prints on his fighters, and they've done pretty well in the UFC.
Oh yeah, they've done very well. So I think
Yeah.
again, so if they read Nakai, that may be the good place to go too, right? I mean, it depends on what do you want to achieve and what do you want to accomplish, and you have to identify what you're lacking, right?
Benefits of a small team, if you find a good small team, is you're going to get so much more attention from your coach.
Exactly, that's my point. Because let's say, for example, ATT or even Takashi Sato, he's in Sanford MMA. Once he sent me a video of the guys if you talk about pro practice, they had like 90 fighters.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't find Japanese gym that can accommodate 90 fighters. But when you really think about it, when you have like 3 or 4 coaches, how can you look at all 90 fighters? Really not much, right? And almost everybody fights on every weekend. That means his coach has to go and corner those guys.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm not going to name teams, but there's a lot of great teams all over the place. And I realized the one thing when I went to UFC London and spoke with a lot of guys on different teams, it's not like every team is perfect. Almost like every team has its own problem. And even between fighters and coaches, they discuss about their issues. Like, for example, I hear some fighter telling the assistant coach, like, oh, I think we've got to get a better wrestling coach. What do we have? Like, he's not that good. His class is too long, or whatever that is. They have all these discussions all the time.
Well, it's interesting because Japan, for the most part, still kind of has that attitude of like, I train at this gym, I don't train anywhere else. And Japanese training has always kind of been not really coaching. It's just like you training and sparring while a guy watches and occasionally points out what you're doing.
Exactly. And they kind of value on a strange loyalty to stay with them,
But
And
it is kind of changing because I do know there are some fighters like let's say like Rena or people like that who are cross training now at different gyms.
right.
So I kind of hope that becomes more normal where you
Yeah.
see fight. She goes to Team Brave for her wrestling, AAC for like overall MMA, but they're all also going to like a Carp DM for their jujitsu, and they're all going to a different striking coach. So
Right.
I just hope.
One issue with that is like, who is her head coach?
Right.
Every time I ask that question to most of the Japanese fighters, most of their answers are, "Oh, me." So I'm the player manager. That may be too early for some fighters. You know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, you have to get experience, and sometimes you see something you don't see if somebody else sees it, right? I mean,
Well, especially because you said for a young fighter, you never want to be your own coach because you need
exactly.
someone else on the outside giving you an objective opinion.
Right, and especially if you're young, even though you're like a semi-veteran, if you only been to only one team or one place that you train, it's hard to see everything else.
Well, it reminds me of with Duke Rufus and Anthony Pettis, where Duke Rufus would send Pettis around to different gyms, get a different look, get a different sparring, see what's going on, and bring it back to the gym.
Right, exactly. So I mean, again, so I wanted to point it out that one thing is the reason why I say that is this because I felt it's how like fighter talks to the assistant coach about another coach probably not good, so you better get a better coach kind of conversation never happens between Japanese fighter and the
I
coaches.
could
Never.
I would I can never imagine a world where a Japanese fighter would criticize one of their coaches.
Exactly with another coach on the same team, but in open
Right.
discussion manner. It's not like let's fire this guy. They're saying like, what can we make this class a little bit shorter, or like why
Mhm.
can't we try something? But it's just there's no open discussion like that in the Japanese MMA between the fighters and the coach. I think that's one of the problem. You
Right.
know. Now, since you mentioned good thing, what I wanted to touch at the last issue is what everyone's here is what's next for Ren Hiramoto. Now, what do
Yes.
you thought about that fight in Landmark?
So the Rising Confession came out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it didn't look good for Ren. Now it looks like his opponent broke both his hands in
Yeah.
the fight.
Mm-hmm.
He broke both his hands, I think, in the beginning of the second or near the end of the first round.
Yeah.
And so Ren was essentially fighting a kickboxer that couldn't use his hands and still had some trouble grappling with him. So I think, but I mean, Ren needs to work on his grappling. Obviously, he's still young in the game, and if he hits it, I think he's training with Ishiwatari now. Is that correct?
He was training Ishratari, but I'm telling you this since I'm his manager. Of course, I'm a little biased, but first and foremost, of course, I don't know if you saw that fight, but he got hit early in the round.
He did. He got his knees buckled, and he almost went down.
Right, and that moment on, he actually had the little lighter head and didn't really stick with the game plan. And the first
Right.
mistake he had was he kept on kickboxer's distance. That was a kickboxing distance. He's got to stay a little bit more far away, which he had to do that.
Right.
But since he
Well,
got hit, he was taken down easily, and of course, it's all excuses, but
well, near the end of the fight, he seemed to be putting it together better.
hmm
But I mean, that I will say, like that punch, he took a lot of shots in the first round.
hmm
I was surprised he didn't get knocked out, to be honest.
right. I mean, that's why even though he got taken out pretty easy in the first round because he was just head was just not there. And but he was able to escape when he got full mounted it, or he was able to defend some of the shoot, right, takedown defense. He showed a little bit of improvement. Although he went into the shoot, he got switched and he got pushed into the corner. So a lot of people thought that he's physically a little bit more weak. But according to Ren, he told me his head was in there. He didn't feel any power because of the punch he took on the first round, caused more
Yeah.
damage than he expected. Now, to answer your question about Ishiwatari, now I'm going to tell you this. You know how Ren came back from Duke Roofers first gym at the end of December?
Yes.
We were told the landmark is going to happen in beginning of February. So I had the choice to bring him back and do another final part of the camp or make him stay there. But we decided to make him stay there because of quarantine rules and everything else. So Ishiwatari-san only came in at the last like 1 month of his so-called fighting camp, training camp. So he was sort of like a visiting coach. Therefore,
Right.
that's why on that fight, him and the father and the younger brother was cornering. And
Mhm.
it seems like Ishiwatari-san couldn't do his so-called head coaching job because he wasn't the official head coach.
Right. Right.
So anyway, so I chose Duke Rufus's place because I think he's the best coach to make striker into the MMA, obviously, right? And
Yeah.
he's not so huge; it's more like a family type. So
Mhm.
he get taken care of well and stuff like that. But going back and forth every 3 months, not having visa, will cost then a lot of money.
Right.
I need to make him active. So
Right.
we had a lot of discussions and we made the decisions to make him stay there to at least next fight. And if we were going to do that, then we have to really set up his team. He cannot
Yeah.
be the player manager. He can't.
Mhm.
Right. So I had a big discussion with him and his buddy, Mr. Ken Hasegawa, because Ken is kind of introducing him to coaches and training
Mhm.
partners, stuff like that. So the first thing I said is that we need to appoint head coach. So it's like we have a company called Ren Hiramoto. We're losing money. We're not getting
Yeah.
any better. So we're gonna have to bring in new CEO. That's it.
Mhm.
And so I say I feel like I'm a stakeholder here. You know, like
Right.
I have like maybe 20% of stock of this company. So now I have a saying to it. So I sat around and let you guys do what do you want to do for first 2 fights. So let me just step in. So what I did was that I suggest Ren to officially offer Mr. Ishiratari to be a head coach.
Okay.
He makes the plan. He should call a shot on all the training. But it's obvious that what he's missing is his wrestling and takedown, right? So that means I need to bring in good training partner for him, but it's for Mr. Ishiwatari to use. So my suggestion is I'm gonna suggest one guy. I'm gonna send this guy into Ishiwatari-san's way, and he can just use this guy any way he wants. You know, so it's like I'm saying we're appointing a new CEO. I'm gonna send a new one board member the seat on the board, which you will support him 110%. That's my analogy. That's what I explained to him, and he agreed. I was thinking about the same thing. So
Japan has such a super high level wrestling program that
Mhm.
fighters have no excuse for not having wrestling skills in
Exactly.
Japan.
Now, however, but I'm not making Ren a wrestler. He's not gonna go do wrestling matches, right? He's not gonna try to fight the wrestlers in MMA fight using wrestling skills, right?
I was thinking more of like a Chuck Liddell or like a Crow Cop situation.
Exactly. He has to be the striker who just cannot be taken down, right?
Yeah.
That's probably the best way. So I'm thinking the best guy is the guy who has a wrestling skill, right? Like freestyle, Greco, whatever. The guy who has a major promotion MMA experience, who has fought in UFCs or big, and also the guy should have a physical power like non-Japanese, rough and wild like non-Japanese. Now, can you think of somebody like that in featherweight who sits in Japan right now?
So a extremely strong featherweight with wrestling with UFC experience.
Mm-hmm. Very wild. Probably physically tougher than anybody you can see in the featherweight in Japan. And right now, I can tell you this right now on the record. If this guy's active today at peak, he will be clever, Saito, Mikuru, no problem. Everybody.
And he fought in the UFC.
He fought in UFC.
Oh my god.
Now, I tweeted about it. I never gave any answers to anybody yet, so maybe you can think about that for the next podcast. But there's one guy who is there.
And who fought for the UFC? There's Omigawa. There's
And I'll tell you this. I'll give you I say I won't bring it a real rough guy, but here's what it is. I'm willing to pay. I already offer him money, so we are paying out of our pocket to this training partner, so Ren can get better. I got the.
Is he Japanese?
No, he's not Japanese.
I think Jamie just guessed it.
I'm not going to answer it yet, but he has to be the only guy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think he's the best.
At first, I was like, "Wait, are you getting Genki Shooto to retire from politics to be his wrestling coach?"
But let me tell you this: I will give you one very interesting trivia question you can use. This is the guy who has fought on all promotions. I think he fought for 5 different promotions in whole career. Every single promotion, either he got DQ or got red card because it's too wild.
I mean, yeah. I think I've heard some wild stories about this guy in the past, outside of the ring as well. So yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm offering this guy a pretty good money. Every time he shows up, I'm paying him because I have to control him that way. I explained to him it's got to be a very cut and dry professional relationship. I'm only bringing him in as a training partner in Ren and also to be a good assistant for Mr. Ishiratari, the head coach, if he accepts. Right.
Not to party with Ren.
No,
not
at all. He's not allowed. I will penalize that boy if he does that.
Exactly. What was that sponsor at Landmark? That green like CBD drink that looked
it's like a
absolutely disgusting.
Yeah. Did you drink? How was that drink?
Oh no! It looks gross.
Oh, okay.
It's like neon green.
Right. So yeah, exactly. So I think that there's a lot of so-called anti-Hiramoto fans in Japan who sends me a nasty direct message on Twitter all the time.
Yeah, that's just the nature of the beast. When you're kind of like a counterculture figure that talks a lot of smack, people are gonna talk a lot of smack back.
Right.
I don't think that bothers him at all.
Mm-hmm. But exactly, it doesn't bother him at all. And the fact is that I think sometimes, I always have this philosophy: a real good movies, like if everybody likes that movie, that's a bad sign.
Yeah.
If you make a good stuff, there's always one big criticism about it too, right? Because so in that sense, it makes sense for so many guys who doesn't like Ren. That's fine, but there's so many guys who likes Ren too. So that's actually pretty interesting.
It's more fun to be a polarizing figure anyway.
Exactly, and of course, a lot of people and sponsors and some promoters suggest me, it's like, why can't you put Ren into amateur Shooto or like D or Shooto shows? It doesn't make sense for talent like him. I think
No,
he doesn't.
you
I don't
can't
want
take someone with that type of name recognition and put them on a lower level show like that. It doesn't make any sense.
Right. So I mean, I really want to try to establish a real good training and good team in Japan, and try to get him a good opponent. And if he wins next time, then he can go back to Duke, I think.
I think I saw some pictures. Didn't he and Naoki used to roll together at Sonic Squad and stuff?
He did a little bit. He only showed up a couple of times. But, just geographically, it's a little bit too far for me to go. Yeah, and how train finishes early in Japan. So, they train at night. So it's almost like he has to run to the train station to make it. So
very true, very true.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
Interesting.
But for Ren, I think maybe it would be more beneficial to train with a guy like Kuramoto than Naoki. Right?
This is the wrestling, yeah.
Right. Because they know how to strike.
He just needs Kuramoto's wife to just come out and tell him that he lost because he's weaker than his opponent or whatever. Like her cold as ice comment that she said to Kuramoto after the Yamaniha fight. Like that was like, oh my God.
Well, I think she's a top athlete, right? I mean, remember, like Kuramoto used to train like only 2-3 times a week during the Shooto days, and she's the one who told him, "What the hell are you doing?" Basically, right? If you want to make it to the top, you got to train.
Yeah.
It's funny, but they're a very good couple. I can tell because every time I talk to Kuramoto, I'm talking to him in the video phone. He's like, okay. Before he answers, he look at the other way and confirm something with somebody and answers. So I'm like, hey, do you ever talk to your wife instead? Kind of stuff, But they're very, very good couple. I can tell they trust each other,
Yeah. I like his image too. I like his whole like bad boy Harley Davidson bringing the whiskey bottle out. It was kind of fun.
Oh yeah, I know. And he likes the Harley Davidson, but he's a real straight guy, no joke, only training, doesn't do YouTube, none of that,
Maybe he could be a good influence on Hiramoto then.
Right.
Before we leave, is Naoki going to New York to train, do you think?
Yes, actually, I'm going to announce this officially that he already bought a ticket and he's catching a plane on 31st of this.
So, should we expect some pictures of him hanging out with Komura K and the former princess while he's there? Or
I bumped into Komura K. Like he was, what's so funny? I'm going to tell you this. I was at the line of a Japanese grocery store. I bumped into Mizuki. I'm like, what are you doing here? And we were talking about RIZIN and we were complaining about some of the stuff. And all of a sudden, a guy in front of us just turned around and like, oh, maybe he's Japanese. And that was Komura K. So he heard all the backstory me and Mizuki was talking about RIZIN and UFC.
So the moral of the story is that Mizuki is stalking the royal couple in New York and following them around. All right.
But we were at this Japanese grocery store, which is like a 10 minutes walk from where he works at. So it kind of makes sense. It's on the way to his home. So he probably stopped.
How's Mizuki doing in New York? Is her leg back to 100%?
Not well. I don't think she could never get back to 100%, but she could get back to the shape where she can fight. And she has this same strength and conditioning coach who can also does physical therapy for her in New York 3 times a week. So
perfect.
And I think
she said she's able to run for the first time in like 15 years.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, imagine she's been always fighting with that injuries. It's almost amazing. She never had one leg entire life, pretty much, But right now she can run, but she doesn't do it so much because you don't have to stress so much, right? But I think she'll be ready to go back to fighting maybe in fall.
Perfect. Got to get Naoki back in the UFC to have the first brother-sister combo of all time.
You know what? I kept telling Naoki that he's gonna have to go back to really strengthen his wrestling and grappling. That was his flaw to begin with. We knew that when he came here 3 years ago.
Is it one of those things where like he's technically a very good grappler and wrestler, but I think Ogikubo just had such grappling stamina, and I think it just exhausted
Right.
Naoki in the last
And
fight.
the fact is, Naoki for the past 2 years when he was in Japan, he didn't do much grappling wrestling training as much as he did when he was here.
Right.
Yeah, so we know that's a problem. We knew that was the issue too. You know.
Well, I remember when we interviewed Mizuki a while back, she said when she first went to New York, one of the big things was she thought that she was a good grappler, and then she went to like Henzo's and started going to places, and she's like, "Oh, I'm not a good grappler. I need to work on this immediately."
Yeah. I mean, Naoki said the same thing. And when they went to Sarah's, just they all get smoked. I mean, the grapplers level is way high here. And a lot of people think striking the grappling is very good. And so, yeah, I'm hoping he'll be here. Maybe my plan is this. I'm hearing there is a no show for RIZIN in June because of this Tenshin Takeru, which I'm guessing there will be maybe 2 shows in July. So I would like to try to get him into maybe second July show if it's possible.
There's going to be a dry patch because I think is May also when the Triple G fight is.
Yes, but I think they will do one show in May because in fact
I know. I think it's not going to be like because March was nuts. March has had so many events so far, but I think that's because they're trying to get it all before the Triple G fight and the Tenshin fight.
Yeah, exactly. But here's what it is. I just got an offer for May, so I think May is happening. You know, for sure.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I think it's gonna be interesting. And let me answer this one question. So what about Ren training with someone like Majima? That'd be great, but Majima lives way that far away from Tokyo, and he, worked during the day welding. He can only train at night, so it just makes it almost impossible.
Well, I think that you also found a crazy person to train with him who is really going to push his wrestling. So
I think it's a good choice, don't you think so?
Yeah. Well,
especially under the control of the head coach. That's the key point. I wish Mr. Ishwatari doesn't think, I'm giving him as the guy to use. I'm going to tell him if you don't like it, you can fire him. That's the way we got to work. So
that follow-up comment's pretty funny. He asked, "What about sending him to Dagestan?" Maybe
what about sending Ren and Naoki to? You know what? I actually, in a way, I would love to send some guys out there to train. I would even love to go with them to see what kind of training they do. I'm into that, and I tell you this is an interesting story. Like compared to Japanese and Chinese, there's a huge difference. Japanese is always so reserved because they don't want to verbalize so much. They expect you to understand what you're thinking, right? The Chinese is so different. So let's say there's a big difference. If the Japanese coach wants to come and see training, they're like, "Oh, is it okay? Should I pay? Should I bring a gift?" All kinds of stuff. Chinese coach, they never ask that question. "Oh, one guy coming when I go and pick him at the airport, there's 4 guys there." Kind of stuff. But that's what makes a difference. They have that attitude that they're willing to learn. Japanese are too reserved.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I wish they'd be more outgoing.
Interesting.
It's interesting. Like, for example, I tell you this very funny story. In UFC London, I was bumping into some gym owners or managers, right? There's a guy from Bulgaria. He has some team. Now he wants to try to sell his fighters. He follows me all over the place, He even eat lunch and everything else. The first fighter he sent me to try to push is on a 7-fight losing streak. But that's the kind of sales spirit the Japanese need.
Yeah, probably not the best first person to send to the manager.
Right, but I'm very impressed, and I like that kind of enthusiasm. Yeah. So I still communicate with him, and I end up saying, like, "Give me the whole roster. Let me see what you got," kind of stuff, But then I might bump into something very interesting.
Well, there's Japan has a whole gaman spirit.
Exactly. You don't need that when you want to go outside Japan and do some business. You lose it.
Also, your MMA prime is such a short window.
Exactly. Right.
That I feel like you need to really. Like when fighters say, "Oh, I'm going to just focus on myself and get the training I need," I'm like, "Yes, finally, this Japanese fighter is not. They've decided not to take 8 fights this year, despite the fact being injured. they're going to be 100% and think about their own career for a
Yeah,
change.
and also, what's so funny about the Japanese is like every time one fighter wants to go train somewhere, I don't care, France or America, anywhere, they are always so concerned about the language that they try to locate somebody who could go with them as a translator. And I always say, just don't do that. It's just better to go dive in.
Well, I think it's worthless too. 'Cause, I mean, it's something you'd think, but with combat sports and training, so much of it isn't verbal.
Right? It's not.
Just watch what they do, and then you just
Right.
copy it.
And of course, and by you go in there and by rolling with them and training with them, that's how you earn respect. It's not like
Yeah.
you ask translator to come and like to get everything going. I don't know. I mean, I wish Japanese get more aggressive and like it's just too reserved.
Well, there's kind of like some of them are just like willing, like take Ren Nakai, for example. She's the extreme example, just willing to sit on the sidelines and wait for someone to call and help. Whenever during the interview, she was like, "Yeah, I want to train in the U.S. So if somebody could invite me, that'd be great." And my comment to myself is just, I mean, if you want to train in America, you should just go train in America. You shouldn't wait for somebody to invite you to train in America.
Exactly. So I mean, it's not that hard. You just go with it, buy tickets and go. Right? I mean,
Right. Mm-hmm.
right. I mean, of course, that there's a money issue and stuff, but it's not like
No.
she has a
All she's got to do
child
is
to take
sell her
care
way
of.
an outfit like she always does, raise a
Right.
couple
It's not
thousand.
like she has a job that she can leave. None of that. Right. So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. No, I always say this because, like, for example, I used to be a competitive swimmer in Japan. When you teach kids, you teach from the technique and you teach from the backstroke, so you don't, wet your face. In America, when you teach kids, what I do, I throw them in the water first and get
Right.
used to water. You know what I mean? That's the big difference between the Japanese and the rest of the world in terms of like approaching how to teach, kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But anyway, so that's the interesting part, and I think those are the little points that I think the Japanese MMA needs to change to get better. I'm serious. When I went to UFC in London, I'm like, are we ever going to see a UFC Japanese champion? And
Well,
something
what they need, there's kind of a smaller version of it now with the guy that, what's his name, Hori, that sponsors Kaya Sakura and them.
Mm-hmm.
They need someone kind of like the guy that started American Top Team to like put some money behind a team and allow the fighters to train full time and to bring in like a world-class wrestling coach, a world-class jiu-jitsu coach,
Right.
and actually have it all at one place.
A lot of people don't realize Dan Lambert is a
Mhm.
multi-millionaire. I mean, he has cruise ship companies, and his house in Fort Lauderdale has 560-degree ocean view, whatever that is, and a full boat deck and stuff like that. But it took ATT a long time to get where it is right now. You know what I mean?
I
Like,
mean, he lost a lot of money in the beginning. It was a passion
exactly.
project of his. Yeah.
Right. A lot of fighter left and started their own team. And I remember like about 20 years ago, the Dan once started to pay all the fighters' salary,
Mhm.
and they started slacking off. Didn't show up at the weigh-ins, didn't show up at fights, kind of stuff. So they went through all kinds of things, and now finally it comes down to this right mix. May not be a perfect, but I mean, it took them a long time.
You have to stick to it. You have to ride it out.
Right.
You
In order for you to do that, you need to have a lot of capital, and
have to have a
I'm
lot
not
of money.
sure.
Yep.
Yeah, a lot of money. I'm not sure Mr. Hori's level of
No.
asset will do it, and I don't think so. We need
On a bigger scale, it kind
much
of reminds me of the
yeah.
UFC in general when Fertitas bought it and they were just willing to eat losses
Exactly.
for
50,
over a
60,
decade.
right, and invest another 15 on tough, whatever that is.
Yeah.
So we need somebody like that's why I'm saying that I think the Kakto Dreamers by Abema TV is going to be a huge issue, point, powerhouse in the Japanese MMA. That company, Cyber Agent, has the money, and that's that kind of money you need to establish big team or legit, sports league, right? Professional sports league. So
Well, you need a team that's able to attract young, high-level talent.
yes,
So you need someone that can get these high-level judo and wrestlers and kickboxers right in the ideally before they're even 20 and
right.
start transitioning them immediately. It's kind of like it's a bad example because of how it ended, but remember when Johnny Hendricks had that team behind him that they paid him an annual salary so he could train full time before he
Right.
was the champion? I'm not saying that, but just that kind of support where the fighters can just focus on training. That's all they have to focus on. That'd be a giant step because I mean, half the fighters in Japan work full-time jobs.
They only train at nights, right? They just can't do it.
Yeah.
And also, actually, there's one interesting point. Is that I think ATT also working with the college wrestlers and letting them. That's totally one point I wanted to say. Like ATT, actually, a lot of people didn't know, but ATT in Midwest had the Ben Askren as a coach. While he was a college wrestler. So at the same time, Ben was able to train MMA too. You know what I mean? So that's a perfect environment, which is hard to do in Japan because of the relationship with judo or wrestling association, all kinds of stuff. You know?
Yeah, I was kind of curious, but you bring that up. At the last New Year's Eve card, the Japanese Wrestling Federation came into the ring and kind of said, "Oh, we'll continue cooperating with RIZIN." I think they had the Kawai sisters there, the gold medalists.
Mm-hmm.
And my thought was, what cooperation has there been between Japan and the wrestling?
You know who is that one corporation?
What, Murata?
Yes.
Yeah.
Kanako Murata. Right.
They're like, we're going to continue to cooperate. But like, Murata was 3 years ago. Like, what's this continued cooperation?
Because she entered Invicta and in UFC now, you know. But it's the Murata that they took it. And I'll tell you this on the record. Everybody knows this by now that the RIZIN has been paying her a monthly salary, put on payroll, you know, took care of all the housing and stuff like that. So, I mean, something you don't see that so much in outside Japan, right? So.
No, not at all.
Right.
It kind of reminds me of what was it, Glory that did that back in the day? What was the?
And also, just to add to the RIZIN's credit, it's not only the monthly salaries that when Kanako had to go look for a gym in the States and stuff like that, they paid for her to go, and some stuff went with her, you know, that kind of stuff, you know.
They've been very supportive in the past. They did the same thing with Kana Asakura.
Right.
Helped her go over there and do training.
Right. And I think they did the same with Miyu and Asa Yamamoto too. Remember, they went to King of the Cage and stuff. So they do have that kind of a support system for the fighters, you know. Yeah, you know. But anyway, so that's it is.
Perfect.
Anyway, so I think we talked enough today. Since we skipped I skipped 2 podcasts. I'm sorry to everybody.
No.
All right.
We had a lot to cover.
Yeah, let's talk again in 2 weeks.
Perfect.
And by then, I can reveal officially who Ren's training partner is.
Well, I think people did a pretty good job of guessing.
But I still have to officially say okay from Mr. Ishiwatari. I'm asking Ken to hurry up and reach out to him so we can talk. But I'm waiting to hear back from them. So we'll see. You know.
Perfect. Well, I look forward to finding out what happened.
All right. I'll see you in 2 weeks.
Perfect.
Okay.
See you.
Bye-bye.